What's good with you too? A convict's perspective. It's your boy Flacco coming live and direct with a little bit of energy this morning. What's good with it? Let's get to it. So on today's topic, as you can see in the title of the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about Black Nortenos. Now, I've seen a lot of interesting comments in the comments and requests for, can you break down Black Nortenos? Do they have to put in more work? How is their status? How are they looked at by the people? And let's just say, man, the Norteño cause, right? The Norteño movement behind the walls, in general, it's not necessarily a raza cultural-based movement. It accepts all razas that are worthy to the cause. And you've heard me use the term La Raza Norteña, which means the northern race, which means all those who accept the ideals or ideologies of the people, the system of beliefs and cause and represent it, can function as a Norteño behind the walls and can push the movement of the people forward. And so let's first look at this topic, man. Some people may ask, well, how is there Black Norteños? How is that possible? Well, I'm gonna break it down real simple. Just like you have white Norteños, which Rojo did a topic on, you have Asian Norteños, you have every different type of group in some symbolic way who have potentially represented North to even NF. You know what I mean? There's been NF members, Filipino NF members, there's been Black, there's been Native Americans, there's been a whole different type of people with different ethnic backgrounds that have represented, NR members, NF members, and so forth. And I'm going to be going into that. But what it comes down to is you're a product of your environment. People, places, and things. You become domesticated on where you live. And if you grow up in a community that's basically Chicano-based, raza, Norteños, you're going to gravitate and build relationships with people from that community where you're from. Those are going to be your homeboys. Those are going to be your friends. If you take an individual who is like white and you grow up somewhere in Iraq or Iran or something like that, and you're domesticated by that environment, the Muslim beliefs, you may adapt to become a Muslim. The Four Agreements touches based on this really good in its intro when it talks about you become domesticated on where you live. People, places, and things direct you in the direction of where you go within your life and your beliefs. Because when you come into this world, everything that you learn, you don't come to this world knowing who you are. You learn these things as you go along. And you can say the same thing as far as with any different group or race or anything. You know what I mean? You can go into Oakland or some parts of LA and they've had Mexican Crips, white Crips. Up north, you have some Mexicans that gravitate towards the African groups and stuff like that. It's just you become a product of your environment. And that's the basis of how a lot of Norteños that are of African descent have become Norteños in all different races, man. And I've had a long, extensive history of dealing with a lot of Black Norteños, right, of African ethnic bloodlines. And I'll say this, everyone that I've met has been worthy, has been down, has been a rider, has been a hitter. I've never met any that were soft or weak. So I'm going to go back to when the first time I ever heard about any Black Norteños. As you guys know, I grew up in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s when the gangbanging scene blew up all over Northern California and down south as well. And you had, in San Jose alone, you had some Africans where like a lot of them were Crips. You had some that were like, they had that base swag that used to wear blood. You had all types of different type of styles, right? And the first individual I ever heard about that was a Black Norteño was an individual named Tito. He used to associate with East Side hoods, and he had a reputation out there for being a hitter, for being a rider, for being down with the homeboys, and he was never looked at in any negative light. You know what I'm saying? I know at first, when I first hit the system, as far as the county jail and all that, you wouldn't really see too many Black Norteños. A lot of them would gravitate towards being Crips or Bloods or just representing the Bay. So I always had a different type of misconception that there was really no Black Norteños, that they would gravitate towards a whole different direction. And even on the streets, man, like I said, it was a whole different era. Gangbanging was at its highest peak, and we funked just as much with other Norteños as well as other Black groups as much as we did with the Sureños. It was about your hood, about where you were from. And there was always conflicts that arised over females or someone going into your neighborhood that was an outsider, over some type of disrespect or whatever it may be. So the mindset most people had back then was, everybody, the alliance that they were never allies. They worked in alliance as far as the African people. You know what I'm saying? So our mindset, like I said, I've met a lot of solid black brothers that were like, Crips, 415, Kumi Cats, BGFs, and so forth. We were never allies, but we had a working relationship that we could coexist in the Pinta. And so the attitude when you hit the county jail or even on the streets was, okay, it could be funk in there, but as soon as you get to the Pinta, we have to put all that stuff to the side and try to have a working relationship. Okay. So through the years, like I said, the Norteños in general that were of African descent, there was not as many as there is nowadays, right? But things had changed. And I remember the first one that I particularly met was an individual named Tomas McIntosh, Chopo from Watson. I ended up going to the oil for that melee we had when I caught a shoe term in San Quentin. And when I got there, here's this African brother that's out there in the yard. And at first, I thought maybe there was a lot of Kumis on the yard. There was a lot of BGF. And I thought maybe he was associated with the BGF or Kumi. Just by the way he carried himself. Like, he had that old school stilo as far as like a soldier, a warrior. And it wasn't toward the end to where when we started having our group juntas on the yard, this individual would take control of the juntas. And I was always kind of mystified about how intelligent and sharp this individual was, how he carried himself. I mean, here's a guy that had he had Coolio braids in his hair, but he was he wasn't a high ranking, he was an NF member at that time. And so I was always shocked in the way he carried himself and what he knew about the cause and struggle. I mean, he would actually, when we'd have our little Glecha groups, like anybody's been to the hole, they would have different groups. They'd have them for the Northerners. They'd have them for the bros. Because there were so many homeboys, they'd have you in groups of 5 to 6. And they'd have 3 or 4 different Glecha groups going on at a time back then. This was in the 90s. And Chopa would take the time to go and intermingle with each one of these groups. And his education, man, his thinking process and his intelligence and the way he carried himself in a professional manner was on such a high level, man, that me personally, I was impressed with it. I looked at him as someone that, man, if he can carry himself like this and elevate his status and stature behind the walls and be recognized as a leader, I want to be able to do the same thing. So it wasn't until years later, see, this is where the stereotypes of NF members, where I was misled. I always thought it would be this viejo with a big old brocha all tatted down. That would be a familiano. But nah, after meeting individuals like Chuco and Chopo and other C's, I was misguided. I had created this whole thought of what I thought a familiano would be. And Chopo was someone who was totally different, but carried himself in the long run of what I thought a familiano was. Therefore, I think he's one of the first NF member that was either full black, or I think he may have been half black. But he was a leader. He pushing that movement, man. He was ready to die or kill. And he would sit there and tell us stories about, before he was set to parole, he decided to make some different sacrifices and catch a stabbing because that's how strong of a believer he was. And so when you see an individual like this, you start to be inspired, like, man, if this individual can sit there and ascend to himself as a leadership position, why can't I? So he was the very first African brother that I met that was actually not only a Norteño, but it was an NF member in status. And like Rojo said before, once you commit yourself as a bro or as an NF member, whatever your status may be, you're respected by the people, period, hands down. Even as a regular Northerner, there's no mistreatment. As far as some people say, okay, if you're black, you have to put in more work, or, are they sent on the missions? No. If you represent the people in accordance to the beliefs, the bylaw structure, you're going to be looked at on equal level. And Chopo was a prime example of that. Okay, throughout the years from there, The next one that I met that I really gained a strong relationship with, man, was Green Eyes from Salinas, Larry Reese. Okay. He was another one. He was an ensolado. He was a bro. When I first met him, he was a northerner. But he was well schooled, well crafted. He had a lot of wiggle to him. He had a lot of hustle. And the type of influence and mouthpiece that he had, he was able to obtain a lot of things for the household with not only other races, but even with the correctional officers. Because he had those PR skills. He had that persona. And me and him became pretty close, man, because when I left, the first time I met him back in 2002, I was given two names to reach back to, and his name was one of them. And so out of nowhere, he gets sent back to Monterey County Jail, and he told me this story because I come back a couple, like 2 years later, a year later, and he goes, man, bro, he goes, I got love for you, bro. He goes, we were sitting in the county jail. We had no soap box. We had no coffee. We had no nothing, man. The homeboys were doing pretty bad in there. And he goes, next thing you know, I get that money order from you, man. Hey, gracias. You know what I mean? I'm like, de nada. And so when I got to San Quentin on my turn back in 2003, there was a carnal, Robert Hanrahan, Bubba from Salinas. And at this time, I had known Bubba. I met him previously, and I worked with him out there. He was the regiment commander for a little bit out there in Salinas. As I discussed, I functioned with 4 different Cs out there in Salinas Regiment. Even though I was in Sanjo, I was reporting to Salas. And Bubba took a liking to me, and a lot of the brothers that he knew that knew me spoke really well of me. So when I got there, they had just recruited Green Eyes as an ensolado, and he was the RA. And so what ended up happening is Green Eyes gets at me. He goes, man, I'm relinquishing my position to you. He goes, Bubba wants me to watch what you do, and because I'm learning this position. So I took a strong liking to that, and I started to enlighten Green Eyes as we went about the bylaw structure and how everything applies and how to run a household, how to conduct yourself, and so forth. Because he was learning, he was pushing that agenda, and Green Eyes has put in a lot of work already, man. Like that's one African brother that I can personally sit there and say, man, that he put in a lot of work, man. He was solid, and no matter what, he was never looked at any differently. Like I said, none of these African brothers were ever looked at differently. And when Bubba ended up leaving to Corcoran Shoe, he left me his position. You know what I'm saying? Which was usually to be filled by an NF member. You know what I mean? This was around 2003. He told Green Eyes, and one of the brothers on the yard was like, I don't know about that. Whoa. Green Eyes came fully to my defense, as well as actually the whole yard against this other brother, man. And then Fred Dog was like, nah, Bubba was going to leave this position to you. But I will never forget that loyalty from Green Eyes, how he backed me 100%, man. And that says a lot about his character, man. I see that he's still active. He's still doing his thing, and much respect to Green Eyes, man. Like he was always a good, solid individual, man. And, he's one of those individuals that, man, will always hold a place, man, as far as respect and relationship that we had when I was still actively in the mix, and so he was like no other. You know what I mean? Like the equality that is looked at within the Norteño collective, you don't discriminate based upon what your race backgrounds. There's always going to be those that may secretly harbor some type of animosity. You know what I mean? If you're not of Mexican descent, but the way the Norteño collective's beliefs are, they're going to have to suppress those feelings, because if they expose them, they're going to be removed. They're going to be deemed. Because it's an equal playing field. If you believe in the cause and are willing to sacrifice and make that dedication, it doesn't matter where you are from. It's who you are and what you represent as a man. Each man's career is going to be based upon their own actions. And there's been a whole lot of other, like I said, I met an individual named Casper from Southside Stockton, man, OG, man. And he was a character, like I told you, man. We were playing that game with those Woods when we were in the hole in DVI, man. And you know what I'm saying? Where the Woods would come by and they're going to ICC, and I'd start chopping up with them, and they start shaking their head, and then he'd come to the window and he'd go, hey, all right, brother. And he'd walk around the cell talking about he's a Blackwood, just joking around, man. Straight character, man. And the other African brother I met was another individual, Shadow, out there from Sunnyvale. He was another ensoldado, really sharp. He held an RA position. And that's the thing about a lot of the African Norteños that I met, Black Norteños, A lot of them didn't just maintain their status as just as Northerners. A lot of them were able to elevate their status as far as insoldados because I guess in their mindset, being that they were of Black African descent, I'm just assuming this, they were not more worthy, but they were willing to push forward a lot more than just the average Norteño out there in the streets, to represent the people. And what a lot of you guys may not know is that January 22nd, 1984, January 22nd, 1988, those are two key dates in the Norteño history. One is recognized as the expulsion date for the Nuestra Raza, which is January 22nd, 1984, when the bonds of format came out and they were implemented. This date was given based upon just an assumed time frame of when the NR started. But a lot of it was also started because on January 22nd, 1988, Brad Prigley, Paulo from Sacra, in 1988, was the first casualty, the first NR member that was killed behind the walls by the CDC. And so we've always paid homage to that day and commemorated the January 22nd because of Paulo's death. And what people may not realize about Paulo was he was a Black Nuestra Raza member, And see, that just shows you how much respect is given to no matter what your racial background is. There's no boundaries. There's no discrimination what culture you're from. If you represent the Norte, whether you are white, Black, Mexican, Native American, Asian, and you push the agenda for the people and were willing to make the sacrifices, you would be recognized. You would be given that equal respect. Because the Norteño Collective, man, as far as the Norteño movement, we're not going to talk about the NF organization because there's a whole different mindset there. That's a criminal organization. That's about monetary basis push. It's about generating money. It has nothing to do with the Norteño movement. But the Norteño movement has always been recognized as a fair and just cause for the people, by the people. Therefore, if you represent the people and you want to align with the similar beliefs and make that commitment, you're going to be given the same respect as any other Norteño. That's just the way it goes. And so, like I said, some people have some type of misconceptions, okay, well, this should be a raza thing and all that. Well, the raza norteña, however, it is based upon a cultural basis in our communities, but it's more about a cause. It's about the northern race. It's about having the same belief system, the betterment of the raza, the betterment of the people. And when they use the word raza, it's loosely termed. It's every race from up north that is aligning to these same set beliefs and pushing that same agenda. Therefore, you're going to be treated with the same respect. Like anybody who knows what the Norteño cause is about, man, the betterment of the people, about equality, about having some type of social status that is looked at, recognized by all different groups, about being given opportunity, about being given what's yours, your rights as an inmate or as a convict, as we like to say. That's what the Norteño movement is about. And if you align with these beliefs and you're not trying to oppress anybody and you're trying to uplift the people, you're going to be given that same treatment of respect. And like I said, it all goes to how you were raised. People, places, and things are going to dictate what you represent. So if like you grew up in the East Side San Juan, in an area that was mainly of Mexican race, Mexican culture, Latino based, you're going to gravitate. Those are going to be your friends. Those are going to be the same ones that you're going to go to elementary school, junior high, and high school. Therefore, you're going to adapt so much of their culture because these are the people you interact with. That's why Salinas has had a lot of Black Norteños. Green Eyes wasn't the only one. You also had Willie Stokes, Shadow. That was, much respect to him for the things that he's doing in the community now, man. But there's been a lot of different individuals, and there continue to be that are of African descent, but choose to align themselves with the Norteño cause. It's the same thing when you hear about Black Sureños. It's not that they just woke up one day, hey, you know what, I want to be a Black Sureño. No, they grew up in these communities. They grew up in these neighborhoods. Therefore, they're going to gravitate towards their environment. The same thing with anybody. You don't grow up in no middle suburban home and just decide, oh, I'm going to be a Sureño today. I'm going to be a Crip. I'm going to be a Norteño. Those that do that, they're never going to last too long. It's about having those friendships and relationships. Therefore, you gravitate towards that culture and you adapt to it. People, places, and things are going to dictate who you are. And so within the Norteño collective, that's why you have a lot of different races who represent the Norte. The majority, of course, are of Mexican descent. Let's not be misled there. But there's a strong population of different races who grow up with these homeboys, or even hit the county jail system, from out of areas, and they get embraced by the homeboys, and they see the granalismo, they see the unity, they see the respect, they see the discipline, they see the structure, and people want to be a part of that. We all want to be a part of something, and if you could sell the people an idea, this is what we're about, you're going to have a lot more people who want to join that, represent that, and push that agenda. It's basically a whole recruiting process tool for people. To the more soldiers you build, the more stronger foundation you have behind these walls. So you want to sell the people a fair and just cause, or something that they can believe in, that they can accept, that they can be a part of. It's the same thing with your neighborhoods. Where do all these hoods come from? It's about having that acceptance, about having that respect, about having that unity, about having that togetherness. The homeboys, my homie, on a whole higher level, pushing the same goals and aims and agendas, man. And this is how you have Black Nortenos. This is how you have white Nortenos. And there's no racial discrimination within the Norteño collective. There's no boundaries. There's no like, okay, you're Black, so you got to put in more work, or you're Black, you can't hold a position. Like I said, out of all the individuals I just named, four of those were clicked up. 3 were NR members. 1 was an NF member. The only other one was the OG Casper from Triple S, who was just a northerner, but he was a worthy northerner. He was down for the people. And so that's my experience as far as with the Black Norteños. And what I tripped on it was the high percentage of them who made that next step commitment. They just didn't sell themselves as just being a Norteño. They were striving. They were pushing that agenda. Like I just said, man, Green Eyes was a bro. Malo was a bro. Who else? Shadow was a bro. And the other Shadow was a bro. And they all put a lot of work in. They held chain of command positions, and they proved their worthiness. They would step into facilities, and the first thing that they would be put in line with the COC, be put on the hit squad. Whereas some individuals would come, and if you just do enough, you're going to be judged based upon your merits and what you're committed to do. So if you're just a regular homeboy coming in from the neighborhood, but you want to do the limited role, leadership is going to recognize that. You're never going to be put into any position to advance. You're going to stay stagnated. You're going to become complacent, and you're going to be looked at as just another soldier that's just taking up space that's there. And eventually your time's going to be called. What I mean by that is eventually you're going to get in line, or you're going to get off. We're going to get rid of you. That's just the reality of the subject, man. Anyways, I thought I would touch on this. I know Gunner touched on Black Norteños and his experience, and Rojo did one on white Norteños, and I figured I would elaborate more on the Black Norteño ones, because the Black Norteños I met all had a significant role within the Norteño movement, the Norteño collective. And like I said, I'm trying to separate the two, the NF organization, their beliefs in the Norteño movement, because the Norteño movement was to uplift the people. It was to push the people towards a cause and agenda, man. And a lot of African brothers accepted this, man, and decided to push that same agenda, man. And so before there's any misconceptions out there with people, they're going to have to put in more work, or they're not going to hold chain of command positions. In my experience and from my knowledge, this doesn't happen to be true. So with that, man, it's your boy Flacco, man. I hope you guys have a positive, productive day. Just a quick spiel, some thoughts, man. As you guys know, we're pushing different content every day. Sometimes we're trying to push a little bit of the positive influences, the positive inspiration on one day. Other days we're doing historical things. Other days we're doing views. We're doing interviews. We're trying to branch out this channel in different directions, man. And it's you guys out there who hit that like and subscribe button, who watch our content, who support it, man, who help keep this channel moving forward. With that, I'm out. Have a good one.